Okay, so without further ado, I want to introduce Katie Atkins of Nordic4, and I had invited her to do a little talk with us about programming Nordic walking for young people, with a thought that we could disseminate this around in the U.S. since you've been doing this pretty extensively in the UK, and so we're really delighted that you've taken time to spend with us, and we thank all the rest of you for taking time to listen in on this. Um, so, Katie, first, could you tell us a little bit about the program that you do, about yourself, your group, and your program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello and lovely to see you all. Thank you very much, Leroy, for hosting this. Um, so, my background, first of all, is in teaching. I had 26 years teaching in the primary sector, 12 of those as a PE specialist, and also working as an advisor, going into schools and helping with curriculum development in sport and PE delivery. And very much coming from an angle of every child finding something that they felt that they could be successful in. Because ultimately, what we want are children who can feel successful, be successful in physical activity, because that is going to keep them engaged for life, which is ultimately what we want to be what we want to be finding. Um, at the same time as teaching in schools, my complete love and passion outside of school was Nordic walking. It gave me my time out from teaching, and I suddenly started to sort of, I suppose, feel that perhaps I could find a way of combining both those worlds, um, where I could set up a Nordic walking business. I could continue to teach, but in a totally different environment, using my skill set of adapting PE for lots of different abilities, from gifted and talented to special needs kids, across a multitude of ages and in different settings, both in community and school setting. Um, so Nordic4 was born. I took the plunge and I left school, supported by my wonderful husband, to set up my own business. And that was 8 years ago. And Nordic4 was born. Um, the reason I chose Nordic4 was I didn't want the Nordic walking to be pigeonholed from the very beginning. So it's Nordic for kids, Nordic for teens, we have Nordic for adults, we have Nordic for cancer, Nordic for arthritis. Sort of Nordic walking is the most versatile physical activity that I can possibly think of, which lends itself, as I say, to enabling people to, whatever their age, to be successful. At Nordic4, we teach children from the age of 8, and our eldest walker is 95 years old. And we teach across that spectrum. So 8 years ago, I started to teach children Nordic walking, and I will come on to the sort of the whys in a little bit. Um, but essentially, it became apparent to me fairly quickly that to engage the children and the teenagers in Nordic walking, the teaching and the curriculum, if you like, that I was developing needed to be adapted to their world. Um, Over the last 8 years, I've worked on developing the curriculum, writing it, including quite extensive lesson plans and schemes of work. And in 2023, I was invited by INWA to present at the International Nordic Walking Conference in Latvia, um, on my work with children. On the back of that, I was then invited to a new position with them to be the international lead for children and teens education. And through last year, working with also alongside Natalia, who is there, who's from INWA, from Spain, and is the joint head of the education committee, we produced a children's course with the full curriculum, modular learning, practical, to be able to start really spreading Nordic walking globally. And last year had the first course we delivered in Finland, had 11 instructors from around the world, and it's really successful. And I feel it's now the beginning of the world embracing Nordic walking for this younger generation. And Leroy, what you're doing today is just massive as well in helping with that. So thank you. My own experience with Nordic4 comes from two main settings. The younger children, aged 8 to 11, in very much a school setting, and the teenagers in a community setting. And it's been working with these children over the last 8 years that, as I say, has helped inform, everything that we can do. But I suppose if I was thinking about the why, I'd like to draw your attention to a publishing which is called the Lancet. And the Lancet is a global publication that has really good sort of statistical knowledge that we can draw upon. And this was from 2021. And these statistics really give the why we need to be doing what we're doing with embracing Nordic walking for the younger age group. So, according to the Lancet, 24% of the world population is aged between 10 and 24 years old. 80%, so 80% of 11 to 17-year-olds are globally physically inactive. 38 to 48% of 11 to 17-year-olds globally never walk to school. What the Lancet actually suggests as the remedy for this globally, and we do need to think globally when we think about who we've got here on our call from around the world, they suggest that multi-purpose environments that promote play and walking are key. So I think when you have global statistics like that have been put out there, we have a massive opportunity to be able to really take this younger generation and to promote a physical activity with them, which can hopefully turn those statistics around. And it's clearly no mean feat to do that. I found through my experience that the approach to do that when you're working with young children is to come at it from two different angles. And again, this is thinking very much internationally as well. So my two sort of central areas, I suppose, to my teaching come from physical literacy and social and emotional learning. And those two together, I think, are fundamental in enabling children, as I keep saying, to sort of feel successful, be successful in physical activity and sport to ensure that they remain engaged for life. If you look at how society is changing, you look at the predominance now of children's use of phones, time spent on screens. not only is that obviously key to our understanding that they need to be being more physically active, but actually the research that comes out time and time again is showing, in fact, how that is a world that is really not beneficial to their well-being and their social and emotional development either. So I suppose that brings us to why Nordic walking. Before I continue, are there any questions that you would like to ask so far? No? No? Shall I just carry on?
Yeah, and I'm sure people are eager to hear what your prescriptions are as far as how you do the programming.
Okay. So I think that when you think about Nordic walking, we're very used to it in the adult world. But it's actually about how do you take that and you adapt it to a child's world so that it is relevant and engaging for them. If you think about swimming, you start off with a young child and they may start to play with water. It's very much a game. As they start to grow, then they'll be more in the water, they'll be starting to become more confident, they're also starting to become more physically competent in what they're doing. They start their swimming skills, they start being able to swim with more technique, they start to be able to swim for longer. Some of them will do it recreationally and some of them will do it as a sport. When you start to teach a child to read, you start with a little kind of foundation blocks. You also would use stories that actually engage a child. You wouldn't start them with kind of adult, you wouldn't start them on Dickens. You would actually use characters and storylines that would be very much engaging for them at their different ages. And that would be different literature that you would use for an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 18-year-old. And so I believe that that is the case with Nordic walking. When you look at physical literacy, and every country actually has a different focus for physical literacy. If you look at the original terminology by Margaret Whitehead, in essence, it talks about confidence, kind of technical competence, knowledge and understanding. But it's all about engagement in physical activity for life. But when you look around the world, every country will have a slightly different focus because they make it relevant to research where they're showing there needs to be a focus in their particular country. So there's always different kind of variations. And at INWA, we have 18 different members, different countries, 2 affiliated, Canada and Romania just recently. They will all have slightly different areas of focus. In the United States, you have your own physical literacy program, you have SHAPE, and you also have the, is it the Aspen Institute as well, which is giving a different focus for how physical literacy would be developed within America. Depends on the population, and it depends on the issues that are facing each population. Social and emotional learning, again, is an international, you can look at it as an international focus. It's looking at how young people develop socially, how they develop empathy, how they relate to each other, how they make decisions, how they start to take on responsibility. And that again is something that you can address through Nordic walking for children at their different stages of development. Now, at INWA, we have a focus on the 10 steps. Leroy, we were talking about this earlier. Um, it's the method of Nordic walking teaching that we use and is also used sort of internationally by the INWA members. So that was my starting point for the development of a Nordic walking curriculum in terms of technique. How do you take what is essentially for an adult and adapt it to make it relevant to a child? Now, I'm not going to go into huge specifics here because you can come and do my course in Finland or join INWA and get lots more information about it. So I need to be kind of careful on the details that I give you. But what I will do is give you a particular example in terms of how I've done it and how it's been relevant to what I've been doing at Nordic4. And that has influenced then obviously what I have been doing and developing with INWA. So if you think about the push in Nordic walking, and that probably is a fairly global part of using the poles. When you talk about it with an adult, you might have a focus where you're talking about the engagement of their core muscles, for example. For a child, they would probably just look at you if you suddenly started talking about that. You know, they might get quite excited. You know, sometimes I have 8-year-olds and they go, oh, going to get a 6-pack, you know, this kind of thing. But generally, they will just look at you because it doesn't make any sense to them at all. Doesn't mean anything. They probably can't even feel it. It's totally irrelevant to their world. But if you turn an 8-year-old into a Nordic frog, suddenly you've got them. So they absolutely love it. So you have both poles, you're sort of double poling, they're jumping around, pushing through the poles. As soon as you start to sort of talk about the power of the push, how it's propelling them forward, how it's starting to enable them to lean forward, how that body position can make a difference with them in their leap as they go forward. Then you can start to make them aware of their body and the impact of using the poles for them. But it's more than that. That might be the physical side, and that can be used to help in their development with lots of different locomotor skills: running, jumping, walking, skipping. But it's actually about what it does internally for them as well. And that is where you can start to think about the social and emotional benefits, because they start to feel quite powerful, almost like superheroes. And they start to believe that they can jump really far, and they can actually start to jump quite high, more than they could if they didn't have the poles with them. When you then move the poles away from them and they're then starting to jump just normally without poles, the impact on them is quite dramatic. And I've seen that. But I've seen the difference as well in terms of how it's affected their performance in school. So at Nordic4 for the last 8 years, I've been working with children who, for whatever reason, have struggled to perform in the classroom. And Nordic walking has been the vehicle to help address these issues. I use the curriculum to enable them to rediscover their self-esteem and to be able to believe in themselves and to succeed not only physically but also academically. If you then go to a different setting and you think about teenagers, so my other group is a teenage group We have 11 to 18-year-olds within the group on a Sunday morning for 2 hours. They are learning to use the push in a totally different way. The push through the poles for them is about enabling them to go uphill more easily, particularly if they were carrying a heavy pack or something. It's about helping their joints as they are growing and their joints are more vulnerable. It's about them learning how the right language and vocabulary for engaging their core and starting to become more aware of what's happening within their body. In terms of the social and emotional side, teenage years are really tricky. It's the kind of time where you realize that your peers have different interests perhaps to you. It's where you realize that actually you consider yourself not sporty. It's where people become quite introverted, perhaps on the periphery of a peer group. Nordic walking is the perfect way of enabling teenagers to walk and talk in nature in a very kind of unthreatened environment. There's no technology. They've got a pole in each hand, so they can't be using any phone or anything like that. They're out in nature, they're side by side, and they start to talk. And they develop friendships that are really special to that group. They come from all sorts of different schools. I teach a lot of teenagers who are autistic. Nordic walking is perfect for them. You know, if you think about why, side by side, not face on. There's always something to be talking about because there's always something happening around them. The poles give a sense of own space, because really your Nordic walking poles provide a bit of a boundary, if you like, from other people. So they have a safe space. And it has been a real privilege to work with all of these different children for so many years and to come up with lesson plans and ideas that can relate to not only where they are in their physical competence and their physical literacy, but think about the different ways in helping them develop socially, as well as sort of finding out about something that they love, they really love. And as they get older, technically, they're becoming more and more competent. So it's kind of a process over time. And if you think about it in terms of a market, you have all these kids then coming through and they're going into adulthood, continuing to find something that they can do with Nordic walking and continue to develop in that way. I think it's a perfect activity because it's so inclusive. And yet it can be done at so many different levels with so many different ages. It can be used almost as like games to build those initial skills. It can be used for full fitness. You know, it'd be wonderful one day to have a world championship for kids racing, you know, at the kind of the higher end or fun end, as well as having Nordic frogs jumping all over the place. So I think probably from this point, it might be an idea to maybe take some of the questions. I don't know what they are, but I can see that some have come in. And that might be sort of helpful to direct things for people. Does that sound a good idea?
Sure. Are there any immediate questions that come to mind?
Have we got any up here? I can't. So Leroy, you can probably see everybody.
Helena is having a question. Helena, can you make it, or should I do it on your?
Yeah. Do you want to tell me the questions, Natalia? I can't, or someone tell me the questions.
Yes, Helena is working in Czech Republic, and they are working with children. So I put the link of the children teaching course from INWA, and she was asking like how to implement Nordic walking in physical education at schools. So how to make it like the local organization or bigger initiative or governmental guidelines, uh, and how to address it to schools, especially for physical education teachers,
Yeah.
and how to make it outside.
Yeah. Okay. So I think so from my experience, the most important thing is to have done your background in terms of understanding about physical literacy, um, the main elements of physical literacy, and how Nordic walking can be used to apply to those different elements, which is something we do on the course. But it's also about understanding about the physical literacy in your own country. So there's the International Physical Literacy Association. But if you put in physical literacy on Google for your own country, it will come up with the guidance for your own country. And that will show you, and this is the same for any country, that will show you where the main focus is, from a kind of the charity, but also from the government organizations. So, for instance, you want to look up what is their main focus, because they've looked at these, they've done the research for your country, and what are the statistics showing. So then when you go along, if you were approaching a school individually, or you were looking at a group of schools, you could actually prepare something that said, this is what physical literacy is about. This is the recommendations for our country. And this is how Nordic walking can be used to address that, so that I can come into your school and start working on that program for you. It's also worth, though, as I was saying, not just focusing on the physical literacy side, but also looking at the social and emotional learning. Because actually, you want to be showing how Nordic walking can help with the development of the whole child, not just the physical side. You only have to look at an international sports person, tennis player, swimming, to know that they all have somebody who is helping them with sports psychology, because they know that it's so much about your attitude and your approach, to determining how successful you can be, or how successful you feel you can be in sport. Children are no different. Some of the younger children, they're already by the age of 8 working out what they feel they can be successful in, or they've already decided whether they're any good at jumping or skipping or running. What we can do is get in there at the age of 8 and kind of, if they've got any kind of negative feelings, start to change that, because there's something about the poles. I've had children who have been totally inactive and refused to take part in a PE lesson. And as soon as they've got a pair of Nordic walking poles in their hand, it's like magic because it's different and they haven't failed in it because they won't have come across it. So it's something totally new and every child can feel successful in it. So I think it's about making sure that you have all your different research in place and then sharing. I mean, I have a lot of impact studies that I've done, those that sort of show all of this and a lot more detail. But that is very much tied up in my role with INWA and the children's course. And it would be wrong for me to sit here and kind of do a course here on camera. But what I can do is to sort of say you need to look at what is being promoted in your own country, because that will also affect your research as well in terms of your funding, in terms of what you can get. That is something I can help with, but that would be more in association with the course within INWA. Anything else? Any other?
Sorry. Yeah, I will add what Katie is saying. It's important the physical literacy, and it will work in totally different in different countries. How to organize that? So physical literacy is one thing, but the fact is how to apply it. And that's the differences between countries. And when we get all together in our conventions and we discuss about things, we see how governments are working, how education systems are working in different ways. So how to implement all this will be different. So we need to know that part in order to make the effort on the side that our country need. And Elena was asking about how to find about the physical literacy, and I put one link that I found from Czech Republic and then the association, Katie. So
Yes.
I don't know if you want to add something else.
Yeah. No, and I think it's I could do my own sort of search for you, and then sort of guide you. But I think it's worth actually looking at the International Literacy Association as well. They have good information and they have good ways in which they can send you into different sort of directions. I think the thing is that when you think about physical literacy, it is not just about this. I think in some countries, there's always been a tendency to think that somebody is really good at something. A child is really good at sport. If, they're a netballer and they have tick, 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 all the different skills that are needed for a netballer, and they can work in a team, and they've got a competitive element to what they do. I think that by thinking like that, a huge number of children have been alienated from physical activity because they perhaps aren't children who thrive in a team situation. They want to do physical activity with others, and that's really important, but they don't necessarily want to be in a football team or a netball team or a rugby team. And they may have felt kind of as a result of that inadequate, or they felt somehow that they failed. And that can start at a really, really young age. I think that what the Nordic walking can do is it can show children and teenagers that actually they can be they can be successful, they can achieve, they can become really quite competent in terms of their technical ability. And that can evolve with them and grows with them. And once you start to get that happening, then the confidence and the social side sort of comes with it. I mean, if you think about it, every kind of physical literacy description I've seen for every country in INWA, they all will vary slightly in a focus, but they all talk about engagement in physical activity for life. That is one of the key things. And they will generally mention the word confidence. And I think that is...
You say confidence there.
Confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, being confident. And that actually is key to selling Nordic walking to a school, because they will have lots of different pupils who might not really be engaging or might not be succeeding. I have some of my teenagers who have come along to the teenage group. They are 12 years old. They have never felt successful in any kind of physical activity until Nordic walking. And what some of them are doing now is, and Leo, I don't know whether you have this in the States. Helena, I don't know if this is in Czech where you are, but there's a scheme which is called the Duke of Edinburgh scheme. It's an international organisation, and it's teenagers who go on different length treks, and they take a backpack, and they have to, it's about learning kind of resilience as well. But they carry quite a lot of weight in their packs, and they do treks of, 1 day, 2 days, sort of 4 days, and they get different sort of awards. My teenagers, probably 3 years ago, nobody in their school would have believed that they would have done a 4 or 5 day trek with a huge backpack on their back. Those teenagers wouldn't have believed it, probably, actually. But that is what they're now doing. And they are achieving their sort of bronze, silver, and gold Duke of Edinburgh awards. They have found a love of walking, a love of Nordic walking, a love of hiking. Physically, they're strong. They are really competent in their skill set and how they're using their poles. They know how to adapt it to different terrain. And back at school, in the classroom, they are starting to change. They're becoming more confident, and there is a belief in what they can achieve. Now, that would not have been possible without them doing Nordic walking. And those are children now who are engaged in physical activity, and they've learned an activity that they can do for life. I mean, I see it every day, in Nordic4. As I said, the youngest is 8 years old and the oldest is 95. I mean, what an amazing thing we have. But it's the kids that we want to get, we want to get engaged. We want to change those statistics. So I think it's about, in a very roundabout way, Helena, it's about doing your research, looking at what the focus in physical literacy is for your own country, looking at some of the research for the social and emotional learning, and then coming on my children's course, and I'll give you the rest.
Katie, if a school was asking you for advice, if they were seeking funding for this kind of a program, what are points that you would make to them that would strengthen their case for funding this kind of a program?
I think that
You talked about increased confidence. That was one that I
yeah,
picked up
I
from you.
think I think there's the two aspects. As I was saying to Helena, you have to do the research on what the need is being recognized for your country is the first thing. So that you're actually, if you're applying for funding, you need to be ticking the right boxes. There's no point saying you're applying for funding to tackle because you feel that Nordic walking will tackle a particular thing if that isn't something that has been actually highlighted within the country as a need. I mean, there's things like increase in, the development of locomotor skills. I would say Nordic walking is quite unique in the sense that you're using both sides of the body. That is quite a difference to quite a few of the sports that they might be doing within a school environment. So that ability to be able to build muscle strength and development in terms of fitness as children get older, in terms of endurance, flexibility, all of those different things that you would associate with normal physical development of a child as they grow, those are addressed with Nordic walking using both sides of the body rather than just one. So I think that's probably quite a key thing. It's also about you take an adult and you teach them to Nordic walk, and you watch them trying to work out opposite hand to opposite foot. That is not a particularly easy thing. There's that whole cognitive side that comes in that we see with adults all the time. That isn't any different for a child, but think of the benefits of actually learning that much, much sort of earlier on in life. So I think you want to be thinking about the benefits of physical development, the benefits of just actually having something that they love and they can do moving around, the more active they are. But again, it comes down to not only the physical side, but also the well-being side. There are, as I say, I have lots of impact studies and things that I can share, but that needs to come from the INWA side. So I think probably as well, it's one of those things that if you are an instructor and you want to start working with children, then you want to learn how to adapt the Nordic walking to them, and then start going into a school, find one local school, start, working with one group, and then build from that point. I think it's quite something to sort of suddenly take on a whole group of schools. I think you're better really starting with one, building up what you're doing, seeing what works for you, seeing what doesn't work. And then when you go along to another school, you can say, this is what I've been doing at that school. This is why it was successful. And so it can start to build in that way. Word of mouth is really important. Yeah. It is. It really is. And I would say that in my community setting, particularly, it's all about word of mouth. So it's teenagers whose parents have spoken to other parents, or somebody has put something on Facebook and they've shared it on social media. And that has been how that has worked. So in the community setting, for me, from my experience, it is all about word of mouth, and it is all about their experience. And it's about the kids coming away from an end of the session having absolutely loved having an hour or 2 hours out in nature, in all weathers, in all seasons, walking and talking, exploring, having good fun, do lots of different games, lots of different activities, and learning their Nordic walking as they're going along in a kind of drip-fed sort of approach. In the schools, for me, from my experience, they have wanted to use some of their funding or use some of their money to have paid me to go in. So you're going in as a volunteer, I go in as somebody who's paid. So to be able to show the impact of what I'm doing in their schools, they need to be able to answer certain questions and questions that go into a lot more detail. So for the schools I'm working in, they want to have more information about the physical literacy and the social and emotional learning side. They, in terms of what they see from their pupils, they want exactly what you're saying, Rosemary. They want to see them enjoying a session and having fun and feeling engaged. And that happens, absolutely happens. But they also, unfortunately, have to do the paperwork as well to enable them to get their next lot of funding. And I think there's a huge amount of funding at the moment. There's a lot that we see in Bristol for adult Nordic walking, a lot of social prescribing, a lot of green prescribing. There's a lot of that sort of going on. And I suppose I would say that you want to make sure that if you're going for funding so that you can get paid as an instructor, you need to make sure that you're covering all of those different aspects. I suppose it also comes down to the individual, and it depends on for oneself as an instructor, or sort of the role that you have with an organisation, what your individual approach is going to be as well, and that probably is going to be dependent on whether people can give their time, really, or whether actually they need to have some payment. I think it doesn't do any harm anyway to show that Nordic walking, it's not a fad. It's not some kind of funny thing that we do with poles. It's a serious physical activity that can be done very inclusively. It can also be done at a high level in sport, as an elite sport, if that's what people want. And more importantly, with the children, it's, as you say, Rosemary, it's good fun, but it can be adapted as they grow for their different interests and different ways of engaging them in physical activity as they get older.
Yeah.
Muscle development, endurance, flexibility, locomotor skills at the younger age. It covers everything. And I think it's good for schools and different organisations to to sort of realise that. I mean, I think Nordic walking should be on in every school. Nordic walking for children and teenagers is really at the very start, I think, of development internationally. So it's a really exciting time. It would be, I have to keep saying to myself, Rome wasn't built in a day. Well, this is the start to actually, to be honest, to have Leroy organising this talk, to have INWA as an International Nordic Walking Association saying, we believe in the development of children and teenage Nordic walking, and seriously enough to put kind of time behind it to help me develop a course, to put it out globally. It's huge. It's huge to have an organization who actually take it seriously, to want to sort of, to put it out there. And that is the beginning. I mean, we had 11 instructors last year who came to Finland to do the children's course. I can see Calvin from Hong Kong sitting there. Calvin was on the course. And we had instructors from Korea, Australia, Hong Kong, Estonia,
Scotland,
Croatia, Scotland, England, it was Greece. That's the beginning. That is the beginning. Of course, the next thing is to be able to get national bodies on board, because at the moment we've got lots of little pockets of instructors doing really great things. But if you can have a national body to
with children,
really, really push children, that's when we can then really start to make a difference. Because it's quite hard to be an instructor kind of doing your thing with children and teenagers if you don't have the backing of your, a big national body with lots of instructors together doing it. Then you can really start to make a difference. And that, I think, is the moment, Rosemary, it will change. I think that is when children and teenage Nordic walking will really start to make an impact and start to help change some of these statistics, when we have lots of instructors from a national organisation working together to really, really sort of, really push it. So that would be my goal.
Why can we not do something online? Because it just seems to be very difficult to do your course.
I think that's probably for another discussion. I think it's British Nordic Walking have their number counts, but it is something that we can do through INWA, and help develop the courses in the next few years in different ways.
Well, one last question, and then we will call it a day. This has been terrific, but Helena had a quick question in the chat. Would you recommend a free hour for the school to show them how the kids love it? Basically a sampler,
Yes.
bring in the PE teachers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And I do those. So I go along and I will do some free tasters for children, for the younger children, and for the teenagers as well. And quite a lot of my follow-up work has come from those tasters. So I think that's a really good idea. The other thing is, I think you have them, I think they are international, where you have Cub Scouts and Girl Guides and Brownies. Do you have those organizations in your countries, like Rangers, Junior Rangers, Cub Scouts?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I do quite a lot of work with them as well. So particularly in the summer months, I do a lot of evening sessions, I call them Nordic activity sessions. And the kids come along and they do, an introduction to Nordic walking, and then we go off for a hike, sort of, the terrain is dependent on the age group of the children. That has led to quite a lot of work as well, and also kind of spreading the Nordic word, and those kind of organisations. I think, as well as schools, Helena, any children's sort of organisations that you can find where children are active out of school, those are also good organisations to approach to do weekend taster for or something like that, and introduce Nordic walking to them, and then see what evolves. I think it depends. I mean, some of the children who want to be in more outdoor kind of nature activities aren't necessarily the children who are involved in team sports in schools. So Nordic walking can be quite a good alternative for them. I think it's good to look at any kind of organisations where kids are enjoying outdoor. In this country we have a lot of work happening with forest schools, where children are learning, different sort of skills out in the woodlands and things, linking up with them, would be really good. I mean, I've seen that Natalia has put up the email for INWA, and if you've got sort of further questions and things like that, then you can email, and it will sort of work its way through to me, or if you're interested in the children's course as well. There's one in Finland at the beginning of September. Then kind of more than happy to give information and things about that as well. So I think it's, for me, being part of INWA has given an opportunity to spread already children's Nordic walking internationally, in a way that it would not have been possible for me to have done otherwise. And I feel really, really genuinely passionately about it. It's quite difficult if you're a lone person on your own and you want to get things built and spread, if you don't have an organisation behind you. And that has certainly, shown the difference, I think, in the last, the last couple of years. But I think as well, it is about getting that national development side as well as just the word that it is just great. As Rosemary, you were saying, it's just great fun. They love it. There are so many benefits. I mean, I could be a real Nordic walking bore for children and teens. I think probably, any other questions and things you have would be good to, email INWA, and then we can go from there. I think, Natalia, did you put the things up there? Did you? Have you put something up there?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, Calvin, I don't know, you were on the course last year. Did you have anything to add?
I think it's yeah. For me, I think it's because it's quite new, and for the concept to develop the not working for children. but I think it's really important because I think nowadays are not people, even though when you deal with the adults, I ask all the adults whether you have been learn how to walk. So such kind of question is to them is quite strange. So because they don't think that we need to learn how to walk, but you can tell not everybody walk properly. And once they being taught how to walk, and they find that proper walking skills that really change their posture and also brings them the health aspect. I think this also applies to children. It's also very important now because now we are in a AI state era, right? So everybody is not much walking, and I think walking is kind of very need to be introduced to the young children so that we can give them the a more healthy development lifelong. Yeah, yeah. Actually, for me, I'm trying to. It's really hard to uh, to make a very I think structured development now in Hong Kong because we are now just under a sports association. It's not a national recognized sport. Not so we need to put it into it. Maybe we have to link it to the physical education curriculum for them to prepare the PE teachers to know about the benefits and impact. I think the term physical literacy and the social emotional learning is really it's very important. I think when I talk to people about these two directions, not of benefits, I think it brings people about the holistic concept about sport that what Nordic walking can bring to people. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think as well that is where it is about understanding the kind of the systems as is right for your individual country and what the approach then is the right way in. And what might be right in one country might not be right, the same approach in another. And that is something which, sort of Calvin, we've talked about briefly about sort of having a knowledge as well about the way in which children are taught in a different country. That also is going to affect your approach that you would have to the schools and affect the way in which you deliver your Nordic walking as well. I mean, having said that, children are children. Children, whichever country they're in, they like to run, jump and skip and hop when they're little. And they love it with the poles, irrespective of which country they're in. Teenagers are teenagers, wherever they are. They will have different issues and maybe different kind of lifestyles to a certain extent, but still a lot of the difficulties or the complexities that a teenager has are going to be the same wherever they are. And I think that is where the Nordic walking is truly, global for children and teenagers. But you do have to understand the nuances for the individual countries and the school systems. But I think that's where, like you were saying, Calvin, physical literacy and social emotional learning are global. They have there are global impact studies, there is global research. It's not just some quacky kind of thing. It's something that anybody in education will listen to those terms and take seriously. So it's a good thing. Helena.
All right. Well, we are at our quitting time anyway. We had the one last question. So I do want to say thank you, Katie, for taking this time to share that information. And I think word will get out about this kind of initiative. And I'm sure that that more and more schools will start to hear about it and get interested. At least that's my hope. But thank you again, and thanks everybody for coming. I will post the recording on my channel in YouTube. Katie, I'm happy to send you the raw recording as well, so you can use it for whatever you want. And then I'll probably break it up into small snippets to share them out on social media in order to keep the attention focused on this initiative.
Thank you very much. Natalia, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I want to say that INWA is very happy to have this course and this education, because the aim of INWA is to spread the word of Nordic walking and go over the world. So we think that do it with children and to change the percentage and the statistics will be very important. So we can educate through the movement to have a better life or better people in our world, all around the world.
One of the things that's not going to be very accessible is once for everybody to get to Finland. That's not, I don't think that's
well, that's where it comes down to the initiatives with the different national bodies as well.
Yeah,
that can then be delivered within within the different countries.
Yes, our goal is to go all around the world, and if there are people interested in different countries, we can arrange the courses there. So next organized course will be in Finland, because it's where we all arrange, and it's our annual meeting. But if there are any country who are interested, we can organize those courses.
Yeah, I've said that I'm happy to fly around the world and deliver the courses. Calvin and I have touched on this. Half of part of the course anyway is online. It's a modular course. So that's self-paced learning. Then the Zoom course is kind of 2 hours done with me on Zoom, again, internationally. And then the practical can be delivered in somebody's country. So that's not not a problem. I would say it's more of a hope. Is that right, Natalia, isn't it? It's something
Yes,
we really want to develop and to really do. That would be that would be great. I'd be very happy doing that.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you. And
thank you. Bye.
Same for you.
Thank you for
Bye
organizing.
bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.